everyone. How we doing? Sure. It's great to see you all. I'm super excited to be here. As we get going, I just want to share two things before maybe we open up to questions. I got to thank some people here, right? So my wife and kids allow me to be a college football coach, okay? And I mean that. So my wife, Lindsay, I love you, babe. Max, my son, Joy, my daughter, they allow me to coach, and so I'm very fortunate to have a family that lets that happen. The second thing I want to share before we start talking about questions, and the story I'm about to share with you is true. So I grew up in Minnesota, a small little town right in the middle of the state, called Litchfield, about 5,000, 6,000 people back then. Minnesota's hockey country, right? So grew up playing hockey. Okay, I had an older brother, younger sister, and we were all close enough in age that some of you who remember what it was like to grow up in the 80s when you didn't have to wear a helmet to ride your bike, right? Or seatbelts were optional, right? Okay, maybe suggested, okay? When you got a helmet for the first time, you just started headbutting each other, right? Running in the trees and things like that. Okay, so that's what I did with my brothers. Well, I don't know, 5 or 6 or 7 years old, and my mom brings home a football helmet. I know what football is. My family weren't college football players by any means. We didn't grow up cheering for whoever, okay? But there's a white helmet with a blue stripe. Sometime in the next year, I see either on TV or in the paper that there's a college football team that's wearing that same helmet. It's Penn State. Didn't know anything about it, but I immediately became a Penn State fan because they had the same helmet that I would put on running in the trees and things like that. So if you were to talk to my high school buddies or even my small college buddies, they would tell you that I was a Penn State fan growing up. I remember, of course, I played O-line, but I thought that I was Curtis Enos running around in the mid-'90s, even though that certainly was not my future, right? Okay. So I'm sharing that story with you so you understand that I'm not taking this opportunity lightly. It's a big-time honor, right, for me to sit up here today and get a chance to interact with this fan base, this family, if you want to call it that, right? Okay. And it was something that if you would have asked me when I wanted to start coach college football, where I'd want to coach or where I'd want to be the offensive coordinator, I would have said this school. And that's a true story. My mom doesn't remember the football helmet as far as she kind of remembers me running into, headbutting my brothers and stuff like that, but she doesn't remember the football helmet quite as well. So I did want to share those two things before we got going. I'm honored to be here. Okay. As we ask questions, if you could do me one solid and just maybe introduce yourself, kind of like on Ted Lasso. Is it Trent Grimes or whatever his name is? Grimes, whatever, right? Okay, you know what I'm talking about? If you have it, you need to be able to start watching it. Start living right. Okay, fire away.
Awesome. We'll start with Mark over here.
Hey, Andy, Mark Brennan from Lions 247. Welcome to State College.
Thank you. Excited to be here.
Hey, you obviously had a great run with Lance over multiple different schools. What was it about this opportunity that made you decide to do something different?
Well, I appreciate you bringing that up. It was 11 years together that Coach and I worked. And I'm very thankful that I got to be his offensive coordinator for all those stops that we had. The story I just told you about, this kind of being one of those jobs for me personally, but also for me professionally to grow and expand myself and challenge myself in the world of college football. Right, and I had developed a little bit of a relationship with Coach Franklin. I think that might have already been documented years ago when we played here. And when I spoke at the state clinic here, I don't know, whatever year that was, it was pre-COVID. And we developed relationships, we were able to stay in contact through the years. And so knowing people is a critical process. Super sad to move on, right? Again, I just thank a ton of Coach Leipold and what he's helped me do with my career. But the opportunity to grow individually outside of his tree, if you will, was a huge part.
In the front, Rich.
Andy, Rich Scarcella from the Reading Eagle. You mentioned your conversations with James. How did that day first start? Was it during the one game, a Buffalo game here, or was it? And how did it evolve during those visits here with Coach Leopold? Did you hit it off right away?
Yeah, I think so. So it started back. I didn't know him when we were playing him. I don't even know if we had shaken hands at one point, but how we first actually met formally was he's sitting in the lobby of the Penn Stater for the clinic, and me and Coach Leipold walk in at the registration, And the four of us stand around talking and just kind of, you know, striking up a conversation for 30, 40 minutes, and it was engaging, and, you know, both parties. And he says, hey, why don't you come by the building tomorrow morning we'll show you around. I said, great. So we came in the next morning, and we toured the last building and talked about football for about 2 hours, just random things from scholarships to how you organize, you know, staff, everything like that. It was a very organic connection, I would say, from the start. You know, and then again, you kind of stay in touch through the years. So that's how probably the first time that we had a real meaningful conversation.
And you hit it off right away?
I think so. Yeah. I would like to say that. I don't know, maybe Coach says something different, but yeah. No, I think going back to the people component of this is that there was a lot of alignment and shared, you know, philosophies of about, you know, people and players and stuff like that. And so, you know, people tend to be attracted to that kind of stuff, right? You know, people we have similar values to, and I think that was what started it.
Over here in the right middle, John.
Hi, Andy. John Sauber, Center Daily Times. James talks a lot about collaboration on the offensive staff. I talked to some assistants that worked with you that said you always made them feel heard. Why is that something that's so important to you in kind of helping your assistants along as well?
Because 13 brains are better than one, really, right? And I think when you look at college football, ultimately it's about the player. And so the more coaches who are, especially within position coaches, they have the closest and most direct relationship to the position players, right? And so that when we can get everybody on the same page about what we're doing and why we're doing it, getting input from other people makes that process go a lot smoother. I think if you look at any organization, and when you think about organizational health in business, or in our world, college football, you know, I think people who are sitting at the table, or people who are sitting in meetings, and I'm sure that maybe you've had a meeting at some point in your life, and how valued you feel when you feel empowered to add or maybe write your own story or whatever it might be, right? You feel a lot more empowered as an employee, and you'll buy in a lot more to what's happening. So just a couple of reasons to summarize this. One, there's a lot of really good ideas that other people have, right? My job is to make sure it's all coordinated together and it's all in alignment and it all fits with what we're doing, right? But then two, when you have people who have direct relationships with the players coming up with ideas, their communication about those ideas to the players it's more thorough and better.
Over here on the left, Corey.
Corey Geiger, DK Pittsburgh Sports. J1 Sider said something fascinating a little while ago. I'm not sure we had really known this. He said that you interviewed for the tight end coaching job here a few years ago, which ironically went to Ty, and now you're essentially his boss. So can you share what happened there, and then just how life plays out, the plan? Like, where would your life be if you had gotten the tight end job here a few years ago versus now you're coming back in as the offensive coordinator?
You know, it's kind of funny you said that. I really have not thought about that too much. But I joked with Coach Leipold, he didn't hire me the first time he interviewed me either. It's true. So I don't know, something about my first impression maybe this doesn't fit well. But the unique thing is, you know, Coach Howell getting the job, who obviously did a great job, and then to come here and continue to collaborate with those people, it's pretty cool to do when you think about how, to your point, where life takes you. If I would have been here, would I have gone to Kansas and been a part of what they're doing there now, right? You know, probably not is the answer. And so to be able to go there and grow, you know, with the people that I was there, the rest of the staff, Coach Leipold and all those players, and then to come here and take some of the things that we learned, you know, from that journey back over to here. I think you said it right when you said it's just kind of, it's life, you know, and you just never know where it's going to take you and what's going to happen. And it would be a point to illustrate the relationships that you have with people. You never know when they're going to be really meaningful, you know, no matter how maybe insignificant or significant it feels at the time. Next thing you know, 15 years later, that person, you know, you're working with them side by side and your livelihoods kind of depend on each other.
Back over here in the middle, Johnny.
Yeah, Johnny McGonigal with Penn Live. Andy, what has been your initial impressions of Drew Allar and those initial conversations? When we talked to him, he said that there have been a few one-on-ones between you guys.
Yeah, I've tried to have as many one-on-one meetings with the players as I can before we get into the bowl game. High capacity guy, you know what I mean? Like, he's wants to sit in the meetings, wants to be involved, you know, with game planning, wants to know the why of things. You know, he's the kind of guy who's a coach on the field and you could give plenty of responsibilities too to make sure you're in the right place. So my initial impressions with him are very, very impressive, you know, from the kind of things that you want from a quarterback. Yeah, it's been really good. He was one of the first people, maybe the first person I talked to, I think, when I accepted the job, and, you know, on FaceTime or whatever, in person a couple of times, but as you want players to take ownership, kind of like we talked about before in the previous question about staff. You want players to feel like they have ownership of what's going on, and it starts with that position. And he is, from what I have seen, very much embodied that.
Over here on the left, Allie.
Hi, Allie Ruby, ABC 27 and Nittany Nation. We've talked to James a lot about loyalty and what that means to him. He spoke about J1 Sider, Ty Howell being guys that he felt like had tremendous loyalty to Penn State. James talks about his loyalty to the overall health of the program. I'm curious from your perspective, you seem like a loyal guy, been with a number of coaches a long time. What does loyalty mean to you, and how do you want to bring that to a fan base that's incredibly loyal to this brand?
Yeah, you know, that's a powerful word, loyalty, right? I think when Coach Franklin talks about being loyal to the whole organization, I think from his chair, that means sometimes you got to make some really hard decisions because you got the greater good, right? And when you're sitting in the big chair as he is, you have to be able to do that. And then so to be a part of that and understanding that maybe the decisions he's making and the decisions that are going to have to occur in the staff room, and you brought up two guys who've been very loyal to this university. It speaks volumes to a couple of things. One, them as individuals, right? But then two, the kind of place that this is, right? From a university athletic department standpoint, and then you had pointed out to the fan base that's so incredibly loyal, right? It's unrivaled, as you would say, right? Or we would all say now, okay? So that doesn't go unnoticed across the country, okay, right? That's what makes this opportunity, this job, a big-time job, right? Because it has a fan base that's so loyal and so diehard, and I'm excited to be a part of it.
Back over here, Audrey.
How you doing? Audrey Snyder with The Athletic. Andy, I wanted to ask kind of how would you describe your offensive philosophy? Because a lot of your former players have said it's about creativity, but also that you're not just going to tell guys that you're going to get them in the right place, that you actually do that.
Well, if I'm going to give you the elevator pitch on what we would want to do offensively, I would tell you that it's a multiple pro-style offense that uses spread concepts and components. And emphasis on the word multiple because, to your point, it's about putting players in a position to be successful. You know, I was just talking to somebody earlier about this, that relatively, I don't want to say recent in my past, but the last handful of years, it's really dawned on me as a teacher, and that's why I got into this profession, to teach and develop, that as long as you as a teacher and a coach understand what your players' capabilities are, and more importantly, know what their limitations are, as long as you can work around those and you have a clear definition in your mind of what those things are, you can put them on the field to be successful in any way. Okay, this player doesn't do this well. Okay, let's not ask him to go to the field and do it. So what I'm talking about, and again, we're going into some philosophical things here, there's really two spectrums when you think about putting together an offense or a defense, right? You have systems, okay, and then you have people, right? And I think when you focus so much on a system, if you're a person that doesn't fit into whatever that mold and that system needs to be, it's really hard to be successful if you don't fit it exactly. And then you have where we tend to lean here, you know, it's about the people, the players. What do they do well? What are they capable of? Okay, what are their limitations? And let's focus and do things that are going to put them in positions to be successful. Now, I know that sounds like the first thing that you would hear in some sort of coaching theory class, but I'm just telling you, theory and practice are two totally different things. And every coach wants to say that, but it's a hell of a lot easier to just have a system and kind of try to fit, whatever, the pieces into it. You have to do a lot more critical reflection as a teacher and a coach to figure out what makes the players go, what things they do well, right? You know what I'm saying? So I appreciate that you've asked some of my former players. You've talked to them more recently than I have, unfortunately, but that's the way some of it is. But if you can't do this, in my opinion, as a coordinator, you're missing the boat. It's because it's always going to be about people, right? And I think when you look at the next level, pro football, they only get 53 guys, so you only have these two tight ends to use, so you better figure out how to use them, right? In college, we have 100 and some people on the roster, so you see all over college football, there's just a mess of people who are just system-oriented. And you better fit this, and if not, tough crap, you know what I mean? Find someplace else to play. Where this person might have very good capabilities to help your team win. You just got to put them in a position to be successful to do. So it's kind of a long pontificating answer to your question about offensive philosophy, but hopefully I answered it.
Back far left, Andrew.
Coach Andrew Clay, WTAJ.
Hey, can we just stop for a second and talk about your sweater? Because that is big time.
Thank you. I kind of have a two-part question with WTAJ Nittany Nation. One, did you ever go through an Andy crisis? I did when I went off to college. The real question is, how much freedom do you feel you have coming in here to make the offense what you want it to be?
Okay, so first question. It's Andrew, that's your legal name?
Yeah.
Well, your mother named you after one of the 12 disciples. So, right? You know what I mean? Some people are blessed with that, right? So, no, I never had a crisis, though. Second question. The second part of the question about, and his coaches documented this too, the journey to getting here, it wasn't snap my fingers and show up, and it wasn't, hey, you want the job, Andy, and show up. There was a long, many dialogues, countless conversations about theory, philosophy, responsibilities, staff, to make sure that it's a good fit, because we've said that word a lot, alignment, fit. And really the only way that you can ensure that you have those things is by spending time with one another and asking questions and hard questions and getting to know one another. So very much feel that we'll be able to do things here, right, to what we feel that we need to do to move forward and improve.
Back over here, Neil.
Hey Andy, Neil Riddell from the Altoona Mirror. Do you run the game from the press box or the field? Have you done both? Can you talk about your preference?
So this will be my 19th year of calling plays, which is a long time. I started saying that to some recruits that we've talked to, and I'm like, that's longer than you've been alive, But anyway, I have been in the press box for every game except for I think 3 or 4 games. And for me, game day is about making sure that I'm calling the best play, that I have a chance to critically reflect on what we're doing, and the press box gives me the best situation to do that. There's also restrooms nearby and food and drink.
They're not here, though.
There's no restrooms here? Well, no problem. But no, in all seriousness, to be in the press box, I think for me, has always been, I call it a sterile environment where you can be up there and you can think and digest without any of the emotion that's happening in the game.
Way in the back.
Hi, Thomas Frank Carr, Blue White Illustrated. I want to ask you another philosophical question about football. A couple of the guys that have sat there earlier today talked about getting players to play fast and having things be simple, but football is by its nature a complicated game with 22 players on the field. How do you go about simplifying the picture for the offense while presenting something complex to defense, especially for the quarterback, so that player can excel in his position?
Yep. Well, I've had a saying for a while now, and players that have played with me could probably regurgitate it back. We talk about win with speed. And so to your point about playing fast, right? Win with speed, right? Allow kids to think, react fast, everything like that. So you talk about complexity versus simplicity, okay? Simplicity will always win, okay? But now I'm gonna go someplace. Do you like ice cream?
Sure.
Okay. Is there a Dairy Queen in town?
Yes.
Well, I'm sure there's a creamer too, right? I've had a little bit of that. It's fantastic, right? Okay, but here's where I'm going. You like blizzards, okay, right? You have probably multiple different kinds of blizzards, right?
Yeah.
Okay, maybe you put Reese's Peanut Butter Cups and Reese's Pieces, right? Okay, maybe you put Heath, right? There you go, right? There's a toffee lover right there. That you're the 1%, okay? So the blizzard in itself, right, is a wonderful dessert, right, which we should all use in moderation, correct? Okay. In itself looks complicated because it's messy inside, right, and the person working there puts it in the machine and the ice cream. But fundamentally, it's mostly made up of what? Vanilla ice cream. So if you could equate offensive football to your favorite blizzard, and understanding that what it's going to look like is going to be looking like a messy piece of deliciousness, but fundamentally is composed of really just vanilla ice cream and your favorite candies, right? That's when we talk about simplicity versus complexion. right? So it's gonna look really complex, but really at the end of the day, it's just two ingredients mixed together. So we want to make sure that we have the vanilla part of our offense mastered to the point that it's a solid foundation of everything that we can do. So that when we mix in all that goody stuff, right, it's gonna make something that's really awesome. That was off the top of my head, by the way, the blizzard analogy. Okay, I hopefully it made sense. We were able to kind of connect those dots. For those of you who are lactose intolerant, I'm sorry.
Up front, Bob.
Hi, Andy. Bob Flounders with Penn Live in the Harrisburg area. Just curious, the story about the 80s and the helmets, were you running full speed into your brothers and also into trees, or was it just your brothers?
Well, you would argue that there's some sort of issues, right, with how I turned out, but no, it was as fast as we probably could run within reason, you know.
My question is, as a college, you play center in college, how did that that seems a little bit unique to be the offensive coordinator, maybe it's not, but how do you think that's kind of helped and shaped you see offense moving forward with kind of a lineman's perspective, because that's a pretty critical position on the line, but you don't usually see a lot of people go from becoming centers to maybe offensive coordinators?
That's a great question. So one of the things that I feel that I've been able to do in my years of coordinating is I've been able to coach every position while calling plays at some point during those 19 years. And that has allowed me to have some big picture thinking, right? And I understand why if you're going to do some sort of route adjustment or some sort of change in a blocking scheme, I have a pretty good understanding of how that's going to affect each of those positions. But to your question specifically about being able to play on the offensive line in college, I do know this: the most important position group in football is the O-line, right? The most important position is the quarterback, but the most important position group is the offensive line. So if you can start what you want to do schematically, right, going back to the players' limitations and capabilities, you start from the ball out. So you start from what the linemen are able to do well and what the quarterback's able to do well, and have a good understanding of that, then you should always be able to at least put yourself in a position to have success as an offense. So it just makes sense that I know what that, the variables that group has to deal with and how fast they have to react to the stimulus when a ball is snapped. You want to make sure that they have a limited number of pre-snap variables, so it allows them to play fast.
Back left, Ryan.
Hey Andy, Ryan Risky with WTAJ and Nittany Nation. This offense has a lot of talent on it, however this season it kind of struggled with some inconsistencies. What have you identified as maybe the reason for some struggles, and how do you feel that your system will be able to make it more explosive next year?
I don't know that I could intelligently speak about what I would believe to be any kind of limitation or whatever would cause inconsistencies. I would tell you that I know what you can do to prevent inconsistencies, and that is by practicing everything that you want to emphasize consistently well, right? I said this before, I'm a huge preparation, a huge practice guy. Like, you can't just go out there and not practice things a certain way and expect to get results on a Saturday, okay? And again, I don't know enough to be able to speak about last fall that way. I'm just speaking about my experiences as a coordinator coach, is that you're going to train your players to be a certain way, and you're going to train them on the things that you're going to emphasize. And so if you want to emphasize being explosive, if you want to emphasize taking care of the football, if you want to emphasize being good in the red zone or in third down, which is we all know are the critical stats in football, at least on offense, like, you need to emphasize those things, and you have to make sure that you have a big picture, intentional understanding of what you're doing and why, right? Okay, and then repping it over and over and over again, defining clearly to the people on your team and in your organization, here's what we want to do well. Here's why I want to do those things well, and then more importantly, here's how we're going to do those things well. It could be how we practice, it could be the individual drills that every position coach is running. You have to define those things and be very intentional about them.
In the front, Mike.
Hi Andy, Mike Corman, statecollege.com. Come post-bowl season, who will be coaching the quarterbacks in the room and then hands-on on the field? And if it's not you, will you have a position group?
Yeah, there's going to be three of us that are working with quarterbacks: myself, Coach Franklin, and Danny O'Brien. And I know Danny's been there since, for the last couple of weeks, who I've interacted with. Does a fantastic job. You have a chance for a guy who's played professional football at the quarterback position to interact with the quarterbacks. I think that's a huge deal. And then Coach Franklin being an offensive guy, you know what I mean, involved, and then myself having coached quarterbacks in the past, and then having to be able to see the whole big picture with them. So it'll be very NFL-like in terms of how we interact with those guys.
Over here on the right, Tyler.
Hey Andy, Tyler Donahue from Lions 24/7. Hope you're doing well. Welcome to town.
Thank you. First person to welcome you, by the way. Appreciate it.
So I wanted to ask about the running back tandem that you're inheriting here at Penn State with Katron Allen and Nick Singleton. We've obviously seen them accomplish a lot. What's your impression of what they've done together this far? And sounds like from both of them, they plan on doing it again in 2024. How rare is that in college football to have two players at this specific position that you can work together on an offensive game plan around?
Well, if you want to play championship football, you have to have balance, meaning you have to be able to throw the ball well, you have to be able to run the ball well. And when you have a couple of running backs like them and other guys in the room, and Coach J1 does a great job of working with those guys, it starts there, right? So your success is in your ability to run the football is going to start with that position, and then obviously the line and tight ends and the perimeter blocking with the receivers. That how well that you can run the football. So I don't know how rare it is. It's hard to say, but I know if you have two guys that are pretty good football players, and I've been able to have that in the past before, that complement each other very, very well as ball carriers, that can be really challenging to defend because everyone's going to be so worried about what do we do to stop this guy, and then another one comes in and they could stay fresh. And at that position, you really have so many hits to give in football, and they could distribute the wealth a little bit, and I call that ball distribution. So the ball can be distributed even within that room is a big deal. So it's awesome. I'm excited. The things I've seen on tape from those guys is very impressive. They're really good players, and my interactions with them so far to date have been all really pretty cool.
In the middle, Mike.
Hi, Coach. Mike Gross, Lancaster Newspapers. After one of the games this year, James said, we have to find a way to get easy throws for our quarterback to get him in a rhythm, easy access throws, etc. What does that mean to you, and how do you make that happen?
Well, when you talk about easy throws, you're looking for often soft coverage. You're looking for things that can get out of his hand on rhythm and timing. And you again want a game plan for those kind of things. Maybe you line up in this certain formation or personnel grouping, you're apt to get off coverage on one of the corners. You line up in a certain formation or personnel grouping, and you're going to allow a tight end or running back to arrow or swing out into the flat, really uncontested, and you can get out of his hand really quickly, him being the quarterback, and into a playmaker's hand quickly. I think that's pretty well stated. I think a lot of coaches would tell you that. There's a reason that quarterbacks, who are winning Heismans and playing in the NFL, they're completing 60 to 75% of their passes, and there's usually a decent number of those completions are, just like you're saying, there is an easy off throw. There's something they feel like he can get in a little rhythm, right?
Let's go in the back middle, Mark.
Hi, Coach. Mark Wogenrich, all Penn State. Quickly, one, what happened to the helmet? Two, your pin post on Twitter is Tigger versus Eeyore. What does that mean in the context of coaching and players? Okay,
the helmet, I have no idea what happened to it. I'm sure it got thrown away at some point, or we all grew out of it. Again, 80s, so everything was a hand-me-down, right? I don't know what happened to the helmet, although what a great story if I still had it and wore it here. Tigger versus Eeyore. Thank you for asking that. I'm sharing this with some of the offensive players later here today. There's a book called The Last Lecture. Okay, if you haven't read it, you should. It's really cool. It's written by a guy by the name of Dr. Randy Posh, who I don't know at all, obviously. He was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, and he was a professor. I forget what university it was. And it dawned on him that he's fighting cancer. He's giving his last lecture to a whole group of college students for the last time in his life. And he says, well, what do I want to talk about? And again, in this book, it's full of really good life lessons that probably, as we all, as human beings, need to make sure we keep the main thing. And there's a lot of profound things in there, but the most profound thing in the book to me was he showed a picture of Tigger the Tiger and Eeyore the Donkey from Winnie the Pooh. And it just simply said, who would you rather live your life like? And it was like, just one of those things, like your mind explodes, because those of us who remember, those of us who have children or have had children young enough to remember Winnie the Pooh, know exactly what those two characters are like. And one's very lethargic and he's down and his body language always stinks. And the other guy's just fired up no matter whatever the situation is. And how does that apply to football? You see, in football, it's not what you do. It's not the schemes that we're going to run. It's not the plays we're going to call. It's how we do those things. And when you train yourself as much in football as our football players do, I mean, think of the work that's going to be done by our football team starting, the day after that bowl game, okay, until we play the first game. Think about the amount of work that they're going to do for that one little moment. And the things that they have to train themselves on, how mundane and monotonous that can be to get up and to work out in the morning and lift and train and run and practice. So everyone's doing that stuff across the country in college football. So what's going to separate us from them? And the answer needs to be is how we do those things. We need to be a lot more like Tigger when we do those things. When it's really easy and requires a lot of discipline to not be an Eeyore when you're doing the mundane things to be a better football player. And that's some real life lesson stuff there too for everybody, right? Like you get to choose which one of those people you want to be on a daily basis. And you get to choose which one of those people you want to be in certain situations. And if we can figure out how we're doing things to be more like the guy who's fired up and energetic to be there, then we're going to be doing them better than our opponents.
Got time for two more. We'll go Jared over here on the left.
Hey Coach, Jared Parker, Channel 6. Before you arrived at Kansas with Coach Leipold, you guys were coming into a team that had the worst offense in the Big 12 for 8 of the 10 years prior to you. You come to Penn State, and it's a little bit of a different situation. Penn State hasn't had issues scoring aside against Michigan and Ohio State. What's the difference in what you're expected to do here versus your past jobs?
Well, I think when you ask about that from an offensive standpoint, it really goes down to really just holistically the whole organization. Right away here, I could tell that there's a really healthy culture in place. The things that the players are saying when I meet with them are very consistent about what they want to do well, what they want to improve on, what they're currently doing well. And that consistency is running true through the staff, in all departments. So, when you're coming into a situation like that, there's already a really good foundation that's already in place that's been built upon. Going to a school like, as you pointed out, that had not had very much success in over a decade, there is no foundation. And so you're truly building it from the ground up, which we were able to do there. So, but you're still building the houses the same way, right? So there's got to be a really good foundation. It's just that here, me as an individual, I get to start a little bit more towards the finishing touches of the house, if you will. Now, I've never built a house, nor am I, you know what I mean? So I've never got to pick like the finishing touches and the doorknobs and all that kind of stuff, but that's kind of probably where we're at. You know what I mean? If that analogy makes sense. So it's going to be different in the sense of we don't have to start from ground level, foundational cultural things. And I'm a big culture guy. I love talking about it. I think our culture will precede our results for sure. That's well documented across any organization. So to be a part of that, to be involved with that, and then to tweak and add in addition to help us be the best is a little bit different.
Last question, back middle, Donnie.
You go to Donnie Collins, Scranton Times. You seem to love coaching, the idea of it, the responsibility of it. Why did you get into it? And is there a coach or two outside of Lance that you kind of open up your mind to what it can be?
Okay, that's a great question. And I'm going to try to summarize the best that I can about when I knew that I wanted to coach. And you don't ever have a profound moment when you're growing up. But again, being in Minnesota, hockey was a big deal. My first exposure to teaching somebody else how to do something was when I was probably in 6th or 7th grade, right? So those of you who know anything about hockey know that you usually start skating when you're pretty young, and they're called mites. And so I was however old, however levels above a mite, but I got to be a part of teaching these young kids how to skate, right? How to just not hold onto a chair anymore, right? And so all the steps necessary to do that. Now again, I can reflect on that now and say that that was a critical moment in my life to figure out that I wanted to teach and coach. At the time I hadn't, you don't think about that stuff. So it goes back to that was my first opportunity to actually teach and instruct something. And so that continued on through growing up, and then it continued into football as I got into high school, and then it continued on through college. So I was very lucky as I was going into college. I knew that I wanted to be a college football coach, which is really weird, right? I had an older brother that wanted to play at the University of North Dakota, and he was 2 years older than me, and he came back, I remember, after his first year, and was like, hey, college football's pretty cool, and we started, again, talk about watching Curasinas on film and LeVar Arrington later on, which maybe I can meet those guys. That'd be awesome if we could get that done. But to recognize how much joy it brought me to see people get better at things that you're instructing them to do. And I can emphatically say that I know that I'm doing it for the right reasons, because that still today is why I'm doing it.
Thank you very much, Coach.
All right, guys, thank you.
Thank you.
What about the Pat Kraft resemblance?
The what?
That you look like Pat Kraft's younger brother.
Someone said that. I don't know if that's true, okay, but that's super insulting to Pat, so I want to bring that up to him. You know? I'll take it. That's what I'm saying.